All right, good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk about the fears surrounding death and how OCD and anxiety latch onto those particular fears, which is always a great topic to talk about because the fear of death is probably the most common question among everyone who doesn't even have OCD or anxiety. The question of death is something that most people believe they have certainty on from different experiences, but the reality is that no one has certainty on what happens after you die. That's why it's the scariest question out there for many people. I'm going to talk about how I broke down the fears surrounding death for me, why I'm not scared of death, why I would not prefer to die, but I'm not scared of dying, as most people are for obvious reasons, because the only thing they know is a conscious awareness, which comes with pleasures and hardships, etc. As you know, the Buddha would say the life is suffering, which it's not. Just life has pieces of suffering, which isn't true. Just like, any of the existential types of belief systems where people can be very pessimistic about life, and there's very tough lives out there for many people. A lot of people have gone through really tough things in their life, and those things are just the realities of life. And having OCD and going through that is one of those things that all of us have to go through. And there's no way around it, Same thing with judgments, same things with people potentially getting fired or losing children or losing their parents or getting into motor vehicle accidents, and everything that comes with some sort of hardship in life that people are trying to avoid at all costs. Death is the number one. Death is the one that people are constantly trying to either not think about or find clarity on the afterlife, etc. But the reality is no one knows what happens after you die. And that's just the harsh reality of life. It's the ultimate question that we're all looking for. So before I go any further, please subscribe, hit that like button down below. Let me know what you think. They have the WhatsApp link for Phil. We can direct message you and get you in. The fear of death is very, very common for many people. Like I said, and let's start breaking it down. So in the 2004 commencement speech, this is usually how I start my death-related videos. Steve Jobs talked about how death is more than likely the best single invention of life. Out with the old and in with the new. And I think there's some great merit in that quote because, when you look at things, let's take, just for an example, I believe the Senate, the Supreme Court, I'm not really sure which one in America, but some of the sitting senators or people in the Supreme Court have been there for 50 years. They're really old. There's no, it's not like a presidency in America where you can serve 8 years as a max. I'm pretty sure, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't really understand that structure, but I know one of them, you could sit for decades, 40, 50 years, which more than likely is very, very bad for growth and accepting new ideas, because a lot of people who don't understand changing of beliefs will stay stuck in the mindset of not wanting to change their beliefs. And that's what they'll do. They'll stay with these rigid beliefs from, say, 50 years ago, and they'll carry those through. And this is why death has such great importance in our life. Now, I was posed a question one time by a good friend of mine who I grew up with, who is the definition of a pessimistic existentialist. He said, if you're not scared of death or concerned about death, then why wouldn't you just kill yourself? Because you know you're going to die anyway. And I thought that was actually a very good question. I remember having this conversation with him for a long time over breakfast when he came to visit about a year ago. And he said, because you say you're not scared of death, but at the same time, if you're not scared of death, since you know death will come for all of us, and he believes that life has no universal purpose, nor do I. I don't think life has any meaning whatsoever. Why don't you just end your life? That was an extremely good question. I really thought he posed a good question with that. So I thought about that, and I've been thinking about that for a long time. And I think it's because as I'm here, I might as well do the best thing I can to bring down my suffering and get myself to a place to where I'm not, I'm giving myself the best opportunity to not suffer. And I think that's the best thing you could do when it comes to OCD and anxiety recovery. Everyone has the ability to do what they want in this life to some degree. I don't believe in free will completely. I do believe there's a lot more neurological behaviors that are automatic than we think. Hence why when you read the book, The Power of Habit, they talk about, I believe his name is Eugene. Eugene was remembering all of his habits when he had really bad dementia. I couldn't even remember who he was, but he still basically would get himself to do these habits. So that disproves right there the theory of free will, because he wasn't free by any means in his mind. he actually was completely deteriorating in his cortex, and he couldn't remember who he was. But he still remembered to do a lot of these big routines that he did every single day, which I thought was really, really unique. And again, this is going to be a great video for people to hear, because this usually with death, there's the existential fears, there's the solipsism fears, there's all those other things that come into it. So you have to get really, really comfortable with the possibility of death. And it can be really scary for people. The other thing about death that's unique is that people, potentially in the religious fears, they believe that if you're not religious, that you're more prone to being to being nihilistic and only performing hedonism in certain ways, which actually isn't true, because I don't do that. So I just disproved that as one person. So when people say without morals and values in the religious sense, which then prepare you for the afterlife, which is conditional by nature, if you look at what most people do, and again, this doesn't mean that recovery and religion is not compatible, but most people are looking at religion through a conditional lens. And I've dug very deep with people if they want to on their coaching calls, and I have had people say word for word to me, if I didn't have my religion, I would feel lost. So, and then we talk about that connection psychologically to God and the mind. And then we talk about if someone, again, is open to it, if I sat down a Christian, a Catholic, and a Muslim, and I said, which one of you is right? They would all think they're right, but they can't all be right. So how do you know which one is right? You don't know which one is right. That's why it's called faith. There's always a possibility of being wrong, and this is hard for people to hear. There's no such thing as I know for a fact that God is real. That is not actually rational by any means. That doesn't mean that I'm right either, because I believe when you die, there's no remembrance of this life, which is a unique thing to think about. Why would I even remember this life to begin with if I'm going to die? So it's a very interesting thing. That's another talk for another time, because there's so many little tangents you can go on. But there's a reason why it's called faith. So this is, again, why the reason why I'm talking about all this stuff, it's why so many people are so afraid of death. It's because of the biggest unknown. And the only thing you know is this extreme consciousness awareness that you don't even have certainty on. You don't know if you're in the vacuum. You don't know if you're in a simulation. You don't know anything. No one knows anything about why they're alive or anything like that. So it's the ultimate question of, am I right? Are you wrong? Vice versa. I particularly think I'm right, in my opinion, like most people. I think the evidence is more in my favor, that when you die, nothing happens and there's no universal meaning. And the universal meaning of life is also another unique philosophy to talk about. Because if you think about morality, let's take murder, the act of murder for an example. Well, as Rob always says, which is one of my favorite examples from Rob, if someone is stuck in a war zone and they have to get out of this war zone alive, and they kill 30 people in a bunker to live, well, they just murdered 30 people. But because the morality of the situation was considered heroic, they're no longer considered a killer or evil, which was premeditated. It was premeditated to a degree. There wasn't long-term thinking, but he probably had to think about how he was going to survive. And if you have someone who commits a premeditated murder in another way, in a lustful way, maybe they found their husband cheating on them and they plan it and then murder their husband, that person's considered evil. So there's all these conditional realms on what's evil and what's not, or what's bad and what's not. And that goes to show you how there is no such thing as a universal bad or good. There's just societally accepted norms, which will look different all throughout different time periods. I'm reading a book right now. I think his name is Michael Stone. I'm only like 40 pages in, called The Anatomy of Evil, which is a really interesting book on this guy who read, I think he said he read 600 books, autobiographies and biographies on serial killers and lots of interviews, expert witness. And he was talking about how it's completely subjective, which it is completely subjective, because if there was that one particular definition of evil, and then he correlates it to the weather as well. I like how he did this. I've never seen someone do that before. He talked about how you don't consider a storm who kills a hurricane who kills 100 people. You don't consider that hurricane evil per se. You call it a tragedy. But why would it not be evil? And then he talks about that's where the sense of human consciousness and morality comes from, to having some sort of determinism of, I'm going to do this. This is my plan, which then considers someone evil. But then that same example of the person who murdered people in a bunker in World War II is considered a hero. So as you can see, there's a lot of there's a lot of loose cracks and loopholes in this argument. People do things for various different reasons. People believe in different things for various different reasons, and neither one is right or wrong. And that's what creates unconditional other acceptance, by allowing people to state their opinion. Now, when you're speaking about death with people, which most people don't ever speak about death, and most people never think about death until they have to. They lose a loved one, they lose a kid, they get diagnosed with cancer. The reason why is it keeps us safe, because it's a very difficult conversation for people to talk about. But for me, I really much enjoy talking about death. So what do I believe? I believe that when you die, it's a vast eternity forever. I mean, if you think about God or Jesus, the Bible, the Old Testament, it's 2,000 years old. But, let's talk about something like this warming period. Okay, so this warming period, I believe, is going to last, 10,000 years. I think we're on the back end of that, 8,000. So there were 6,000 years before that. Then before that, there was a 100,000 year ice age. And then before that, there was a 10,000 warming period. So what about all of that? What about all those people that were born there before there was God? It just doesn't make any sense to just be like, well, the people after Jesus are the ones that are going to go to heaven. To me, again, I can completely be wrong. I could die and go to hell. I mean, the reality is there's only two options for me. There's three. It's either there's nothing and you die and nothing happens and there's no memory of this, and or you die, God's all forgiving, very similar to the New Testament, and he's all forgiving and everyone goes to heaven, which would be a very interesting place, because you're going to go to heaven with Hitler, Mao, Jeffrey Dahmer, Gary Ridgway, all the serial killers, etc., Dennis Nielsen, all that stuff. You're going to go with all the serial killers, all the people you consider dictatorial, psychopathic maniacs. Or there is a God that's similar to the Old Testament, who is very judgmental in many ways. And again, I'm not some theology master. This is just from my basic understanding, which is about 0%. More than willing to admit when I'm wrong on that and have a conversation to learn. But for my understanding of that, it's very much I'm going to hell, and I will be going to hell. So those are my only three options. I would put my money that there is no heaven or hell, and it's just an eternity. Again, when you're talking about death with people, be prepared for people to argue their way with you. If you're having a conversation with death with someone and you realize that it's not going anywhere productive, it's okay to end the conversation. This is something I've realized with many things in my life, the big ones, right? Money, politics, religion. Those are the conversations that people have a difficult time bringing down their emotions and having a stable conversation with an individual, because it requires thoughtfulness. It also requires the person to think in a different way, that they could be wrong. And that's why I'm not scared of death. So, going back to my friend's question in the beginning, where he said to me, well, if you're not scared of death, why wouldn't you end your life? Because you don't believe there's anything anyway. The reason why I don't is because I create some sense of value system for myself now that is pretty much very much in line with a lot of cultural beliefs. A lot of times it's not. There's numerous things that I don't see the same light as most people, like drugs. I think all drugs should be legal. No, we should tax them. We tax gambling. There's no reason why all other drugs shouldn't be legal, in my opinion. And then we can at least provide clean substances like needles and stuff like that. It doesn't work. The war on drugs has been a complete failure. It's very easy. Don't need really any. You have to rub two brain cells together to see that one, etc. So I don't see that. And there's many other views like that. Some things I'm more strict on, some things I'm not. So I design a lot of my own belief systems and values to certain things. I don't take on public opinion. I think public opinion is, for most people, is a very thoughtless process. It's a very easy and understandable process, but it's very thoughtless. And that's why I enjoy my current perspectives on life. That's why I haven't ended my life, or why I didn't want to end my life. And I don't know if saying I'm not scared of death is truly the correct thing to say, because you can't really know that until you're faced in the moment of death. So this is just completely theoretical. But I do think that if I was met in the face of death, I would handle it a little bit better than, say, most people, because of my beliefs of working on this stuff and talking about it with people all day long. But I've also accepted the reality that I more than likely will not live forever. And also when you go into even deeper conversations, when people ask, well, what's your opinion about the possibility of living forever and consciousness being uploaded? I don't particularly think that that's a good thing for humans. I think death is a very much a necessity for humans. I think that when people have the capability of living forever, I don't think it will progress society forward in the ways that we think. I actually think it could end very badly in certain ways. It's a personal opinion, completely theoretical. There's no way to know that. But yeah, I would prefer if humans died and they kept on dying, and humans would come and other generations would come, etc., like that. So that's just what I think about that. Always willing to have a conversation, but you know, I broke that down by the obvious. This is more of a philosophical video on like my beliefs and how I think about the death situation. Do I think I'm ever going to see my father again? No. Would I like to see my father again? Yes, but I don't think I'll ever see him again. Obviously, he died 6 years ago of cancer. And again, with the universal fairness and deserving the stuff based around death, we know that that's not real. Because kids wouldn't die of cancer, there wouldn't be malaria, there wouldn't be tragedies, 9/11 wouldn't happen, big tragedies all over the world, war zones, current wars wouldn't be going on. So it's not as simple as just there's some sort of universal deservingness. It's actually quite easy to break down once you look at the tragedies that happen throughout human life, and especially in the younger ones. There's a preference for fairness and deservingness, but there can't be a universal truth to that because of how people see that in the lens of that shouldn't be happening or this shouldn't be happening. So those are all the pieces that come together to form my perspectives on death. I know it was kind of like off topic and just kind of just different views on the way I value life, etc., like that. I don't think life is particularly that important. I think because humans have a consciousness, they put more value and target on their lives over, say, like a whale or a lion. But there is actually no difference. And that we're just another being on this planet. We just have a prefrontal cortex that works better, and we can think about our thinking and stuff like that. But I wouldn't say that humans are particularly better than, in a conditional manner, than other things. But there's things that we do for survival, like eat meat, etc., like that. And so there's understandable evolutionary things that happen in our race, but I don't think that humans are particularly better than any other race. I don't look at it like that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. A little bit more philosophical than I usually do, but these are a lot how my one-to-one calls will go. I hope you guys enjoy it. Keep me posted. Remember, the webinars 8:30 p.m. on UK time on Tuesdays, and the one-to-one spots are really filling up, and we hope to hear from you soon. Have a good one, everyone.